Okay, picking back up with our last page of notes here. So we talked about this a little bit as I went through the textbook, but inference is an extremely important concept in AP Statistics. It is the process of drawing conclusions about a population on the basis of sample data. And random sampling eliminates bias in selecting samples from the list of available individuals. So what is margin of error? We didn't talk about this much, but margin of error sets bounds on the size of the likely error. So sets bounds, it's an E right there, on the size of the likely error associated with inference due to variability in sample results. So I want to focus on the word error right here. A margin of error is really just giving us a certain level of confidence. So we have one sample and we may know one sample statistic. So say example, we may know the average GPA from our sample. But that sample GPA is not going to be exactly what the population GPA is. So, and it's not that we did anything wrong, it's just the variability when you sample. You get different sample results every time you sample. So margin of error, this implies you did something wrong. You really did not do anything wrong. Not really a mistake. It's just the way that you can take one piece of information and infer it back to the population, even though you know sampling variability is a very real thing. Okay? So the next thing is the laws of probability. Allow us to construct a margin of error based on factors such as sample size and variability of the sample data. So we use the word variability here. We also use the word variability here. These are two different types of variability. This is variability due to the sample results, due to every single sample being a little different from the next sample, even when you sample correctly. This is variability of the actual sample data. For example, how spread out is that data? Is it something that's pretty consistent, centered at the kind of centered at the mean, or is it something spread out a lot more? So we'll be talking about those throughout the year. So what is the benefit of increasing the sample size? When you increase the sample size, you have larger samples that give better information about the population. So the larger the sample, the more likely that your sample statistic is going to be closer to the population parameter. That's just, so if I had a sample mean and I wanted to know the population mean, I know that if I had a larger sample, that sample mean is more likely to be accurate. Okay, so summarizing this, what is the sampling frame? It's the list of available individuals. From which we draw our sample. This should basically be the population. This should be every individual in the population. Okay, abbreviating there. Okay, so what is undercoverage and what problems might undercoverage cause? Okay, Undercoverage is when some groups of the population are left out of the process of choosing a sample. This is known as a sampling error. So sampling errors occur when there's a mistake made in the actual creation of the sample. So this would be a sampling error. When this occurs, the sample chosen may not represent the population well. And this would be known as bias. And bias results for a lot of different reasons. This is not the only one. Okay, so what is non-response and what problems might non-response cause? And how is it different than voluntary response? Because students get those two things confused. Non-response is called a non-sampling error because the sample has already been created. This happens after the sample has been created. It means it is not a result of poor sampling design. It occurs when selected members of the chosen sample cannot be reached for some reason or refuse to cooperate or participate. Maybe they don't answer the phone. Maybe they've had their phone disconnected after the sample was created, something to that effect. Voluntary response is a sampling design in which volunteers choose to place themselves in the sample survey. So voluntary response is a sampling design in which volunteers place themselves in the sample survey. Okay, so very different thing. So someone that doesn't respond to a request to submit information is not responding, but it's the different type of non-response than what we're talking about here. So that's why these two things are easily confused. Okay, so the final little type here . What is response bias and what problems might response bias cause? So this is another type of non-sampling error. Okay, so another type of non-sampling error is response bias when people give false responses for some reason. Sometimes people will lie because they are embarrassed to respond a certain way. They may feel guilty about the response. So the final one is the wording of a question. Again, this is a non-sampling error, and it's another type of non-sampling error, like I just said. And when questions are leading or confusing, okay, it will lead to another reason, but it will lead to bias again. So many reasons you can end up with bias. Okay, we're going to finish off today with assignment 4. And hopefully you have a little bit of time to work on it in the class, ask questions, and finish it up tonight for homework.